This is a wonderful day. It's a day that 2 years ago, I felt that I needed to try to do something. I watched on the news, like probably most of you, someone murdered on international TV. I have clients all over the world. They were wondering, what are we doing here? So what I decided to do is to do something. And so that's what I'm asking all of you to do. Everyone in this room, I've either personally invited and or our committee work towards getting you here so that we can see what we can do together. Because it's not gonna happen if we just keep talking about it. So we're hands-on, we're rolling up our sleeves, and we're wanting everybody to hopefully do the same thing. On that note, I want to stay on time, on task, and on target. I'm a professor, so we have a tendency to talk and talk and talk. I have someone over here that's going to wave at me, and I'm doing that a little bit too much. I'm emotional about it because it was an emotional situation for me. So I made sure that we wrote a script so I can try to stay to that. Because as you know, sometimes in emotion, we can drift and go off on some subject matter. But today I want us to stay focused so that we can get something done. So if you are in this room, in my book, you are a powerhouse. You are someone that can help me, help others, and that is the goal. So first, let's have you give yourselves a hand for making it here at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I now want to do something that I believe is very important, is ask our Sand City Mayor, Ms. Marianne Carbone, to come up and bless and acknowledge the land. Can we give Marianne Carbone a hand? She's one of my best friends, and this is doing so much in your community, and I thank you for making the time to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to try and speak into the mic here. So, greetings from Sand City. My name's Marianne Carbone. I'm the mayor of the city of Sand City, and the first elected Indigenous woman mayor in the state of California. I am of Chumash descent with Esalen relatives here within the community. And it is truly an honor to be at this event to open up with prayer and with recognition to the first people of the land, the Esalen Rumsen people. It is important for me to begin by acknowledging that these lands were never ceded, but rather lands that were taken through violence, theft, and occupation. I ask that you acknowledge, recognize, and understand that Indigenous people are still living and thriving, and that their resurgence is very important. I ask that you help me to acknowledge this and to celebrate all Indigenous people and all people of color as we work through the issues of anti-racism while respecting the homelands and communities where people live, work, and play in peace with healing and love. I will offer a prayer and a blessing. Creator, we gather here together to give thanks and honor, O Ma Nakwish, O Grandmother, Butash, Mother Earth, the one who shelters us and sustains us with nourishment. Let us give you thanks and treat you with respect, O Ma Nakwish. And to the four directions, the east, the place of springtime, of life, the breath of sunrise, and a place of new beginnings, O Ma Nakwish. To the south, a place where the land meets the water, a time of the fall, a time of respect and knowledge for the future, O Ma Nakwish. To the west, Kakonamawe, Creator, may we give you thanks and honor to the ancestors, the spiritual world, and Hutash, our Mother Earth, Omanakwish. To the north, a place of wisdom, a time of remembrance of our ancestors, the lost ones, the winter solstice, Omanakwish. Thank you for having me here today.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second annual Symposium honoring the life and legacy of George Floyd. My name is Jacqueline C. Simon, and I will be your MC today. George Floyd's death in police custody on May 25th, 2020, sparked protests and a national reckoning on racial justice and police brutality. Today, we come together to reflect on the impact of his death and discuss the ongoing fight for justice and equality. Today, we gather to remember George Floyd, whose tragic death sparked a global movement for justice and equality. Throughout this symposium, we aim to shed light on the persistent issues of police brutality and promote meaningful discussions about social justice. George Floyd's death was a wake-up call for many, and it was a worldwide wake-up call. In fact, I'm recalling the fact that it was other countries that stood up first for what's been happening to the African American community in this country forever. So I applaud the fact that they stood up first. The global response to George Floyd's death demonstrated the power of unity and solidarity. People from diverse backgrounds came together to demand justice and demand accountability for police officers' actions. We must remember that George Floyd's death was not an isolated incident. Instead, it was a stark reminder of the disproportionate violence and discrimination faced by marginalized communities, particularly the African American Black community, at the hands of law enforcement. We have an esteemed panel of speakers here today to share their information and uniquely bring us together with their perspectives. Because I actually believe that all law enforcement, of course, is not bad. I don't want to defund the police, but I want to have them become more involved on a community level. And I'd like us to rid out some of those that gives the rest of law enforcement a bad name. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that today. One of our speakers here is the Chief Borges, and I happen to believe that Seaside is actually doing the right thing. There's a lot there that we can learn and others can learn from in the city of Seaside. So on that note, I would like to also bring up Pastor Matthew Irving to bless our event. Pastor Matthew Irving. He's walking up, not sprinting up. I know him well. He is an athlete. And I'm proud to say he also is my pastor. And he's my cousin.
Thank you, cousin. I'll make this brief because, as she said, I am a pastor. And as many of you know, pastors have a tendency to be very long-winded. So I'll make my prayer short. But again, I'd like to echo that we thank each of you for gathering here this afternoon to be a part of a critical session to talk about the critical things that are happening in our society. And you being here today is very valuable to let us know that you too care about humanity and the fairness that all men and women shall receive. So we thank you. So as we pray for this, I'm reminded of a song think recorded in the late 70s by Diana Ross. And she states, what the world needs now is love, sweet love. I believe if we can all operate in that vein, that things could be a lot better and brighter for us if we were to take the time to love on one another. So let us pray. Father, the creator of all mankind, creator of this universe, we are thankful for this setting. We are thankful for those who have come. We are thankful for the men and the women who serve to protect and to care for their particular cities and the neighborhoods. We thank you, dear God, that you have allowed us who are here today to be able to have a voice. You have allowed us to gather to be able to share the concerns that we are faced with on a daily basis. We pray now, and we lift up this setting and lift up these who shall share, that we will embrace one another's concepts, ideals, and thoughts, that we will learn how to work in the spirit of harmony and in unity, that we can see a better society, a better world, that we can embark upon love, sweet love, that we can be a catalyst that can make change and be a difference. I pray now for every voice in this place, that it will ring out and echo, and that we may catch a hold of what's transpiring and be that instrument and be that vessel to be about change. We thank you now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. And now at this time, we'd like to have Mr. Mel Mason come up and acknowledge the heritage and historical relationship between our land and our people.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. It's a real privilege working. It's a real privilege to be here this morning. Glad to see all of you. My name is Mel Mason, and among other things, I am a co-founder of an agency called the Village Project. And at the Village Project, one of our programs is called Emcee. Emcee is a Maasai word, and it means warriors camp. This program, which is, we just finished our 6th year of it, is a program for children of African ancestry, grades K through 4. What we certainly intended to do with this program, and our intentions have borne out to be the truth, and that is when young African American children learn the history, the true history of their ancestors, going back to the beginning of the human race, which was in Africa. All of the empires and queens and pharaohs that came later were in Africa. When they understand that the arts and the medicine and the practice of science and all of that was invented by those people who were from Africa, it gives them a better sense of self. And one of the things that we often talk about is the power of identity. Nobody can tell these children who they are because they already know who they are. They know more about history than some of the teachers that they have to see every day. One of the things that we do when we start each session of Emcee, and by the way, Maasai from Kenya, first year, actually came to visit the children when they found out that we had one of their programs that we were using to educate our children. When we start Emcee, we start with what we call a libation. Libation is a ceremony or a celebration that started in Africa. And what we do is we take water, which is the source of life, and we pour it on a living thing. And then we say out loud, an ancestor, or an ancestor's name, someone that may be an immediate ancestor, someone that just passed away in our family. Because what we do every session is that we invite our ancestors into our session with us. The spirit of those ancestors are there with us. And we also remind the children that once you bring the ancestors into the room, it probably would be cool if you behave, because the ancestors are watching. It sometimes works. But what I would like to do today, because we had originally planned to have some of our young warriors, as we call them, here today to carry out this ritual. But we forgot that they're in school today doing their exams. This is, I think, the last week of school. So, presumably they're all going to do okay. So what I wanted to do today instead was have all of us participate in libation. So what we can all do is if we can all stand. And if we can think of an ancestor that who we would like to pay homage and tribute to, say that name out loud. And then I will pour this into this plant. And then we end it by saying Ashe, which means, and so it is. So on the count of 3, I want everyone to say the name of an ancestor whose spirit you want to invite in here with us today. And then we will go on from there. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. And we all say? Ashe. So it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mason. Mr. Mel is fine. I've known him for years. In fact, he and my father used to be running buddies. At this point, I was going to be introducing all the dignitaries here today, but I am so proud to say that all of you are dignitaries. And I see so many of you out there. I'm not sure if everyone checked in, so I'm going to miss a couple of you, maybe more. And then when I'm finished with that, I would like you to stand, if you would, and just share who you are. Because I'm not sure if everybody's on this list. We already know San City Mayor Carbone. And Ana Velasquez, Mayor of Soledad. I see you in the green. Supervisor Glenn Schertz, Chief Representative, and my friend Marilyn Vieira. Your neighbors, the Honorable Bert Johnson from the Community Foundation and the CEO of the Community Foundation, Mr. Alville. Please stand. And there he is. This man is a true rock star, doing so much in the communities and all communities. And in fact, one of my division chiefs that's here, we were talking to them earlier, just all the wonderful work that you did in Pajaro. That's one of my districts. I'm an elected official here in this county. It was my firefighters and fire department that literally evacuated 2,000 people, and not one person was hurt or harmed. And I think that's tremendous. You all, I believe, spent at least $700,000 helping and assisting, and that was wonderful and fine. And we're looking forward to the aftercare level to help and assist those individuals. So please, if you give the Community Foundation a hand. We have our mayor, in fact, he'll be speaking shortly, but we have Mayor Ian Oglesby. We have the Jimmy Panetta's, Congressman Panetta's office is represented by Ms. Xochitl Guerrero. We have the Honorable, and I almost want you all to stand when we do this, Miss Helen Rucker. Thank you for that. That is so honorable. I'm so happy to be on the advisory board of the Helen Rucker Center for Black Excellence. If I haven't called on you, I'm just going to look into the crowd and see some people that I know because I don't have you on the list. If you checked in, I would. We have Miss Kathy Viala, please, Councilwoman of Marina. We have, oh my goodness, Dr. Kim Barber from CSUMB and council member, City of Monterey. We have Superintendent PK, everybody knows him by PK. PK. We have the president of the NAACP, Lyndon Tarver, who also worked on our committee in Black Space. We have the honorable and good friend of mine, Rosalind Green. Please stand, Rosalind. Everybody knows Rosalind. Let's see, we have Miss Ruthie Watts. Everybody knows Miss Ruthie Watts, please. We have Sherry Hastings. Please. Doing so much in the community. We have Yvonne Thomas's family of sisters. Please, the three sisters, would you just stand? Come on, a little exercise. There you go. Rock stars. And I'm getting a little note over here that I need to tie this up, but I still see a couple more people. My good friend of 30 years, I believe. I almost feel like not saying that, but Mr. Dave Pacheco. Alrighty then. I do know that there's members here from the Public Defender's Office, the District Attorney's Office, fire departments, other cities. If anyone wants to raise your hand before I cut to the chase and get back to the order of things so we can stay on time, on task, and on target, please stand, sir. Pardon?
Yeah, Councilwoman.
First lady of Seaside.
Oh, yes, please. Councilwoman. City of Seaside. All right then. So the person that they're referring to, can you stand? Because I'm not sure who it is. Of course, Mary Claypool. She's very special. Anyone else before we move on?
I'm Alex Miller, Seaside City Council. Thank you.
Alex Miller, great. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Again, know that you're all special and you all are really rock stars to me. And because you're here, you're taking the time to be here, I thank you. On that note, I want to look at a very, very important opportunity to bring someone up to speak that has really done a lot of work with the Helen Rucker Center for Black Excellence. And that's Dr. Vanessa Lopez Littleton. And so I'm a professor. I can be long-winded. I'm not saying she is, but her resume is just so much. I want to share some of it if I could. Give me some time. Please. So, I would like to introduce Dr. Vanessa Lopez Littleton. Dr. Lopez Littleton is a visionary leader, experienced delivering healthcare services, addressing complex issues in social justice, conducting community-based research. She is an associate professor and chair of the Department of Health, Human Services, and Public Policy at California State University at San Jose, CMUMB. Yes. Where she also serves as chief assistant to the Dean of College of Health Sciences, Human Services, and Director of the Helen Rucker Center for Black Excellence. Dr. Littleton holds a doctorate in philosophy and public affairs with an emphasis in health, serves as management from University of Central Florida. She earned a Master's of Public Administration degree from Louisiana State University, my mama's town, and a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from Northwestern State University. Dr. Lopez Littleton, and this is awesome, is also an Army veteran. Let's give her a hand for that. And she's a registered nurse on top of everything else. So if something happens, she can help us in so many areas. Dr. Littleton.
Thank you. All right, so, yeah, I don't know, sometimes I get embarrassed when people start rattling off all that stuff that I do. It makes it seem like I'm really busy, huh? So I'm honored to be here today, and I wish I could say that this was just a happy, joy occasion, but it's not. So this marks the anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, which is why we're here, because this community and the people in the room truly care about one another and care about our youth, our young people. And so today I want to share just a little about the Helen Rucker Center for Black Excellence, which is what I've been asked to do. And at the end of my short presentation, I will ask you to locate a little piece of paper on your table, and it has a QR code so you can take out your phones, and I'm going to ask you to think about ways that you can support our organization and the work that we do in the community. All right. So this is our vision. Our vision, as you see here, it is not just something that's confined to Cal State Monterey Bay. It's something that's really about the world that we live in. As you know, college campuses are microcosms of society. What that means is they are reflective of the things that are happening outside of the campus and in our communities. So when there's tragedies, when there are harms that are happening, these things also have a way of manifesting on our college campuses. And that happens at CSUMB. And so a little bit of honesty here. We started the Center for Black Excellence. I think the initial name was the Center for Student Success, because we recognized that our Black students at CSUMB weren't being supported in really meaningful ways, which means they did not feel a sense of belonging. Their graduation and retention rates weren't, in good comparison to some of our other colleagues of other racial and ethnic groups. And so we put together the center where we could help them do what they needed to do in order to be successful. So we support them in research, we do cultural programming, we engage in the community. I'll talk a lot about the things that we do. So that's what our roots are. Our roots came out of oppression. And a lot of times you'll see the things that Black people do in our communities. It's rooted in oppression. It's because we're trying to survive. And so that's what the Helen Rucker Center represents, not just to Cal State Monterey Bay, but to the community. And so with our mission really is about serving the campus and serving our community. And over the next couple of years, what you're going to see is more engagement, more interactions between the campus and the community. And we're going to be intentional about that work. So our pillars of excellence kind of start with our values, which are service, community, and excellence. And then the pillars are civic engagement, education, and service learning. And so these are things, I met with Helen, I don't know, I think it's been about 3 years ago, and I asked her about the things that were important to her. And service was right up there at the top of the list. She talked a lot about voter registration and getting people to be a part of our civic responsibilities, civic duties, and that's what we want to make sure that we're doing on the campus and in the community. And so here are some of the things that we are actually doing on the campus. One of the big programs that we have is called the African Heritage Research Collaborative. And in that collaborative, we pay students, most of those students are African Heritage students, we pay them $5,000 a year to be involved in research. We also have mentors, faculty mentors from our campus. In the future, we hope to do more community engaged work. Shout out to the city of Seaside, to Community Foundation. They actually supported us in doing a study on COVID-19 in the Black community. Once we found out that Black people were not getting vaccinated at the same rate as other racial and ethnic groups, we mobilized and we did something about it. We did the study, and thanks to the NAACP, we're now working with the Village Project Incorporated to be able to continue outreach on COVID. And that's so important because guess what, you guys? COVID is still spreading in our community. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's still out there and it's still spreading. And people are getting severely ill and some people are still dying from COVID. So we need to remain vigilant in our actions against it. And so I won't go through all these other programs, but we also do tutoring. We do some of that cultural programming. But one of the things that I can say about the Helen Rucker Center for Black Excellence is everything we do it in partnership with someone else. We don't go it alone. And so if you have events, activities, ideas about things, reach out to us. We'd be glad to partner with you on those. All right, I'm gonna get through this. All right, so here are some of the ways that we ask people to get involved, of course, through donations. We take financial gifts, we take financial donations. Most of the money we get goes to our students or to programs that support our students or to the work that we do out in the community. We're very fortunate in that we don't have to pay for space. We rarely have to pay for, the upkeep of buildings and facilities right now. But as we continue to grow, it's something we'd love to have. We'd love to build a building in honor of Helen Rucker and all of the other people who've made CSUNB and the work that we do supporting Black students possible. Every February, we have an all-Black gala. We'll have it again in February. We don't know who the speaker's going to be, but the community is always invited to participate in that event. We do a lot of community engagement work, and I can't see the other thing that we're doing, but those are some of the things that we do and opportunities for you guys to get involved. And so shout out to all of our supporters. I didn't list them all here, but if you've supported the Helen Rucker Center in any way, we want to thank you. We appreciate you and what you do for us. And that's it. And so now here comes the ask of you, because apparently we have a little bit of time at our tables to do things, right? And so the only thing I'm going to ask you to do is to find this little thingy paper on your on your table, and if you would take out your phones, you can take a picture of the QR code. It'll take you to a really short Google form, and it'll just ask you about what you might want to do in order to support the Helen Rucker Center. And one of those ways to support is through financial contributions. You can make a financial contribution. If you want to write a check, you can make it out to Cal State Monterey Bay and put in the memo, Helen Rucker Center for Black Excellence. If you go to the website, there's ways to give at the CSUNB website. Just make sure when it asks about where you want the donation to go, make sure that you say you wanted to support the Helen Rucker Center for Black Excellence. I don't know why they think we come up here and talk about money, because I really don't like talking about money. But I'll be honest with you. If we're going to do the work and if we're going to make our community better, we need resources to be able to do that. So if you have your hand on the pulse of money, we want that money. No, I'm teasing. Well, we do want the money.
Who wants that money?
Because we do good work. We do good work. We're very committed to the cause. And I think that of all the things that you can do with your resources, supporting students and supporting young people and the deep connections that we have with the community is a valuable way to do it. All right, I'm out of here. You're good.
Just don't drop the mic. I think she did. It's wonderful and awesome to work with a director that is hands-on and understands and gets it, that we need to be out here in the community making it happen. And so, Dr. Lopez-Littleton, I thank you. We're not asking for money, but if you'd like to donate, that'd be wonderful. Another group that's supporting us, and in fact, all this art, this beautiful art, is brought here by three of my good friends. I want to introduce them. Pam Bosner, just stand. Tammy Sapka, and Ann McDowell. You probably all remember having worked with Bill Money and with Honorable Glenn Church's office. They're part of an organization called CAS, Action Alliance. The CAS Action Alliance is a group of individuals dedicated to speaking up for, advocating for, and working for social and restorative justice. CAA was inspired by Isabel Wilkerson in 2020 by the book Cats. What they decided to do, and I mentioned earlier, we have to just do something about these issues in society. When they saw what happened with George Floyd, they formed a group. They formed a book club. They went to the Community Foundation and was able to set up a way to get funding in. And when they have funding, they go to high schools And anyone interested in going, any African American students that's interested in going on to higher education, they then help to fund that with their own money. So can we just give them a hand for that? This will be auctioned off. This is a creation of Pam. Pam, just stand for a second. Just want to talk about you just a little bit with your cute hat. I love the hat. It's a Black Panther hat, I think. It is, yeah. This is a beautiful piece of artwork, and if you had a chance to take a look at it, you know, it's awesome because, you know, there's many different women in their African and or cultural expression, and it's talking about the future. And the future is right when we love and respect each other. That's part of the problem, I think, with some systems and some people today. They are leaving that word love out and not acting on it. So this is something that's very, very important to us. I thank you for bringing in the artwork. We have some work that was created especially for our event. Before you leave today, take a look at it. They also brought books that is going to be auctioned off. Actually, it's going to be given. We've already made the commitments to a various number of people. We just went through it and found numbers of individuals that were here, checked off their list, and so we'll be presenting those later on. But thank you for standing up for the African American community, and particularly African American boys and men that have been murdered in this society in just the last 2 years. So I have this. The next person that will be coming up to speak is one of my dear friends as well, Yvonne Thomas, and you probably heard her before. She is someone that has spoken for anything and everything that has to do with community outreach and leadership. Yvonne Thomas is a veteran journalist, media professional. Precision Creative Services is her company. She worked with Y Golf Magazine, founder and CEO. She was a successful 2-year term president of the NAACP. We should give her a hand for that as well. She's currently continuing to work with the NAACP, but has her own podcast called Central Coast Conversations with Yvonne Thomas. There's a lot of other wonderful information here. Please review the rest of it. In the essence of time, I'd like you to hear and talk to her and hear what she has to say as opposed to me. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Jacqueline Simon for organizing this very important event. I was very honored to be invited to speak last year, and it unfortunately took place the day after the shooting at the elementary school at Uvalde, Texas. So emotions were running very high. That day last year, and on this day 3 years ago, when George Floyd was senselessly murdered in Minneapolis, well, it could make an outsider believe that America lives in a perpetual cycle of post-traumatic stress. These unthinkable tragedies keep occurring again and again and again. And those two events will forever be connected by a nation filled with overwhelming sadness and grief. What happened to George Floyd in 2020 still deeply affects us right here at home. And it feels that we don't get the opportunity to sufficiently heal from these traumas before having to quickly change gears and process yet another one. It slaps us back into the reality that justice is very often not fair in these United States for many people, and particularly for Black Americans. George Floyd's life mattered, as did the precious lives of Daunte Wright, Rodney King, Sandra Bland, Philando Castile, and there are so many more. And it's important that we utilize these watershed moments in our country to be the momentum that swings the pendulum that fully addresses the inequities and injustices that people of color are still facing in 2023. Yet the Monterey Peninsula is not Texas or Minnesota, and we want to make sure that it stays that way. One of the goals of this symposium today is to learn from each other and to heal ourselves and our community and improve the relationship between law enforcement and the people starts right here and right now. But before you can strengthen a bond, you need to actually have a bond. That starts with people being able to witness the dream of police, extending a protective olive branch to us instead of reliving the nightmare of them brandishing a baton as a symbol of excessive force. I was born and raised, respectively, in Fort Ord and Seaside. And I also lived in Los Angeles during the 1992 Rodney King riots. During my lifetime, I've been pulled over 3 times for driving while black. And even though half of my lifetime was spent living in greater Los Angeles, the 3 times that I was pulled over happened right here at home. Once in Fort Ord when I was a teenager, once in Seaside when I was in my 30s, and the last time was around 5 years ago, right in Pacific Grove. Any black person that you talk to has a story to tell like that. Why? Because the stories are traumatic and because they are true. Right now, we are living in a difficult time where some people don't want these stories told anymore. We're living in a time where attempts are being made to erase historical fact and dilute the uncomfortable realities of the dangerous and messy world that we live in. And that disturbs me because they've totally missed the point. It is imperative that we investigate the past to understand the present. Black communities live in a society where instead of focusing on the dream of building generational wealth to fortify our legacies, we are compelled to instill generational fear into our children, and especially to our young black men. Something has to change. We must modify our actions and our systems so that we don't lose hope. Our forever First Lady, Michelle Obama, wisely taught us that when they go low, we go high. But she'll also tell you from her own personal experience how going high all the time can really take a toll on you. Going high tells us how to exercise restraint in the face of frustration. And to say we are frustrated is the understatement of the century. Restraint, however, is a necessary tool that we are teaching our young so that they can stay alive to see another day. But the downside of these lessons is that they have cemented a victim mindset into our psyches. I read a quote once that said, "If you only teach about our tragedy, we'll only be seen as tragic." That is unacceptable. So we have to create a different path. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is one way to hold law enforcement accountable, to reform police training and policies, and to alleviate the stress and anxiety of a culture living in constant fear. We must come up with ways to work with our local law enforcement agencies to reimagine policing and public safety in this community. And I see this as an opportunity for all of us here to be proactive rather than reactive. So much time has been spent looking back on our past and focusing on all the trials and tribulations our ancestors faced. But I choose to take a different approach. When I look at our history, I see a brilliant roadmap that was designed by our elders and that is filled with mountain ranges of strength, winding rivers of courage, and circuitous valleys dotting the landscape of an extremely strong, resilient, and resourceful people. That is who we are. That is who we must strive to continue to be. Law enforcement in the city of Seaside is definitely making an effort to change. I see it, and I am more than happy to do my part. It is my dream that the rest of the nation follows our lead. It is our responsibility to establish boundaries in the present that will ensure that our future is better. George Floyd's life mattered. My life matters, and yours does too. The lines of communication are wide open right now, so let's make sure that we use them to truly walk the walk and not just talk the talk. Thank you.
Absolutely awesome. So glad you shared all that, because if you didn't, I was. Please, another hand. I mean, that is such a compliment. In the essence of time, I've been made aware that the mayor has another event that he has to attend. So therefore, we're going to have Mayor Ian Oglesby come up and speak next, as opposed to the other person. And then after him, we'll have the chief of Seaside, Police Chief Seaside, Borges.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, and the organizers of this. When I leave here, I'm rushing over to CSUME with the Institute for Innovation and Economic Development to lead a discussion on how we actually continue to have economic development in our community, and I want to make sure I'm part of that discussion. And so, thank you so much for that. I do want to acknowledge our team that is here. Again, it was said before, but I do want to acknowledge the whole council. Everyone except Councilmember Garcia Zola is here. I know if he was on the peninsula, he would be here today, but I want to make sure we acknowledge my Mayor Pro Tem and our two council members, Burks and Miller, who are here today. And a special shout out to my dear friend, Mayor from Soledad. Well, that's my dear friend. Mayor from Soledad and Velasquez, all the way from Soledad. Easy trip. I just want to say good afternoon. I'm glad to be here to speak with you and be able to share a story about how Seaside responded to the tragic murder of George Floyd. In the wake of this event, let me just digress a bit, maybe a quick 30 seconds. I believe that day, PK, you can help me out. It was a wonderful day, beautiful day. We had graduations over at Laguna Seca. We finished the graduation at Laguna Seca. Me and my wife come down, turn down Broadway, and we see, tens of thousands of people, I would say. And so I dropped her off and parked somewhere by City Center, and lo and behold, we was in the thick of it. And me and Reverend Lust inserted ourselves into that group. I'm sure it was other community leaders there, but I remember him. And we did our best to make sure that violence did not prevail, and it was a positive experience for all those that were there. Marched up a little bit Broadway. I guess we realized it wasn't nothing up Broadway but the former Fort Ord and some dirt. So we turned around, we said, let's go back down to Fremont and Broadway. And then someone said, let's go to City Hall. And so we marched on City Hall that day and left the banner of hope in our wake. And through those walks and those conversations, we had a lot of conversations with young people, and I think the council took it to heart. And some of the things that we did do to make change in our city and recognize the need for meaningful change, and so we embarked on a transformative journey towards justice, equality, and reimagining community safety. I think right about that time, reimagining was a new word, new concept for a lot of us. So one of the things that we were able to do is take money out of our savings and start a line item in our budget of $500,000 to dedicate to social service grants for local nonprofits, grants specifically designed to support best practices and innovative initiatives aimed at uplifting our underserved communities, i.e. we funded for the very first time youth leadership and mentoring programs that were not funded before. We doubled our summer job programs. We put money into community arts and musical programming, not necessarily African American, but the Hispanic community also, because we are a whole community. We set up, try to make a good foundation for building healthy communities in our communities, and we want to keep that going. We invested in other programs, and we are actively working to address the systematic issues that have perpetuated inequality and marginalized community of colors for these years. But as you talk about reimagining police force, Seaside has embarked on the recommendations of President Obama's task force for the 21st century in policing. We adopted the 6 pillars that they have listed there, and then we're using those as guides to reimagining community safety. I'll be brief in the outline. First, in the pursuit of building trust and legitimacy, our police department has become more open and transparent. With the appointment of our new police chief, who is a trusted leader within our community, he is fostering a community of accountability and understanding the needs of his community. Secondly, we have prioritized police oversight by establishing a community advisory safety commission with community members. Their responsibility is to review police policies and actively engage our residents, ensuring that their voices are heard and their concerns are understood and addressed. The third pillar involves leveraging technology and social media, bridging that gap between law enforcement and the community. I think some of you have seen how much posting our police department and fire departments are doing nowadays. Is very, very often when the chief feels the need to go live, particularly about some type of event, emergency event that the community needs to know. He's on live social media, moving the community forward. We have mandated the wear and activation of body cams, which is important. We prevent, so to speak, in our policies, the use of chokeholds and things like that. We try to adopt many of the 8 can't wait items that tend to increase safety in communities. Fourth, we are committed to community policing and crime reduction through new initiatives like the Lights On program, which I'm sure the chief will highlight in a minute. But I do want to stand here proudly and say we're the 2nd city in the state of California to adopt that program. I believe the other city is the large city, San Diego. So Seaside is punching away at that. We have increased our number of license plates readers, and it was a few people in the community that was not sure if that was a good idea, but I think every 2 days we catch something by those license plates reader, meaning the police can really concentrate on violent crime instead of maybe social issues. And that's a result of coming out of George Floyd murder. We have 2 or 3 programs where we do non-violence diversion for our youth and young adults, making sure that no one other than those that deserve it are pushed and forced to stay in that school-to-prison pipeline. That makes sense, right? Sometimes you just have bad people, but no one other than those that deserve it. We're trying our best to make sure that they have a way out of that pipeline. We're putting as many holes in that pipeline as we can for those that don't need to go through that system. We're actively involving residents and co-producing, I say co-producing their safety. As residents, you are our partners in community safety. This collaborative approach fosters a sense of ownership and shared responsibility for our community's well-being. Fifth is the importance of training and education of our police officers. By offering, in some cases, requiring additional training, we ensure our officers are equipped with the skills and knowledge to navigate complex situations and empathize and become more professional. Lastly, the wellness and safety of our officers are critical. And sometimes we take that for granted, that our officers are sometimes overworked and overused, right? We know about that part, but they're overworked and overused, and we need to do as much as we can to reduce that stress, because at a certain point, you know, if you overstress the officers' capabilities, it impairs their judgment, and their behaviors are adversely affected by poor physical or psychological health, which endangers our community. We're at Seaside, we're making tremendous strides in transforming our police force from one that merely patrols the city, to a department that actively collaborates with residents to improve community safety, fostering a culture of trust and transparency, mutual respect, working together to move our city forward. We must recognize that progress is a continuous journey and there is still work to do. We know we still have work to do. However, Seaside response to the murder of George Floyd serves as a powerful example of a community resilience and determination to the commitment of justice. By standing together, we have shown that positive change is possible. We can create a future where every resident feels safe, valued, and heard. And I want to thank you for your attention and the commitment not only to reimagining policing, but taking actions. This is your community to help us take actions to improve community safety that makes the change. I look forward to working with you together for a brighter, safer, and inclusive community. Thank you so much.
Really, one of my favorite mayors. I know a lot of mayors all over the nation. This one is definitely stepping up and making it happen. I see him at so many events, and that's important. In the last week, we've been in at least 4 or 5 of the same events. So thank you for that. Next, I know this man can sprint. We are on the clock here. Chief Nick Borges. Nick Borges has worked for Seaside Police Department for 20 years. He has devoted his life to helping others and changing police culture. Mr. Borges has published 7 articles, wonderful, about building community trust. Thank you for coming. I've heard you speak a couple of times. Come on over. You don't have to be afraid of me. I've heard and observed and seen what you're doing out there, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted you here today. We had this conversation a couple of times. People need to know in the community that we're doing the right thing. Yes, we can do more, but other communities need to know, and hopefully model it after what we're doing. So thank you for making the time today.
Thank you very much. Again, Nick Borges. I've worked here in the city for 20 years for the department. Monterey Peninsula born and raised here on this peninsula, so I'm very familiar with Seaside, its history, and our peninsula's history. I do have to point this out. I want to thank the City of Monterey, the Police Department, as well as Marina Police Department for joining us today. I really appreciate you guys being here. And of course, our Seaside officers here, Commander Doza and Officer Moore. Just to take you back to this incident that happened 3 years ago, as you guys can remember, we were all in lockdown. It was COVID, and you couldn't go to a gym, so I was in my little garage space, which is very small, exercising, and the news came on. And I just froze watching this, and I didn't even have sound on the TV. And all I could find myself doing is yelling at the screen, "Get off of him, get off of him." Even to this day. And I try not to watch this often, but to this day, when I see the video, I say the same thing, get off of him. I don't understand the purpose of that. I've been here for 20 years. I'm not the biggest guy, but I've had situations with people as big and bigger as George Floyd where they were physically attacking me. And that is not what you do. There is no reason to lay into a highly trafficked roadway on top of somebody's neck and hold them there for 9.5 minutes, handcuffed, with 3 officers there with you. So it's very difficult. Even more so is the officers who stood there and did nothing. They did nothing. They stood there. And if you watch that video again and you watch the walks of life that came to the sidewalk to tell them to stop, you had a firefighter, you had different races, you had people of a variety of background all seeing the same thing that America saw. Get off of him. He was crying out for his mom. He was crying out for his mom. And his life was taken from him unjustly over a $20 bill at a market. The mayor touched on this, but I'll say this again. Seaside responded. I don't know what other community here regionally is having this right now. I really don't know. My guess is very few, if any others, are doing this. This is Seaside. This is what happens in Seaside. This is why I love working here. We take lead on things. And when this happened, I will never forget, there was a prayer vigil that happened in front of City Hall. And I was told by members of this community, from colleagues, not these gentlemen, but other colleagues, people that I know and respect, people that are very well respected within this community, don't attend the prayer vigil. Do not do it. It's too raw. There's too much tension between the police and the community. And part of me was saying, okay, that's probably the smartest thing to do. Sometimes I just act on things. And that morning I finally said, no. This is my community. I don't agree with what happened, and I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be part of the prayer vigil. And I did. And I stood in the back, and some officers came, and Miss Annalisa Mitchell, to my surprise, asked me to come up and speak. And I did. And I had no speech prepared. I have no speech prepared today. I just have bullet points so I don't miss anything. But I said something that I knew the community needed to hear. And I'm going to be very upfront with you. When these tragedies happen, and this is part of the thing that needs to change. We hear reimagining policing. Let's change policing. We can imagine too, but let's change it. I said something from my heart, and all I said was, if I was there and my officers were there, we would have stopped it. On or off duty, we would have stopped what happened to George Floyd. I promise you, we would have stopped it. Especially if it was within our department, we would have stopped it. And the last thing I said was to the Seaside community, which I say a lot, is I love you. Like, I love this community. I love the people here, and I've seen people at their absolute worst. I've had arguments with people at their absolute worst, but at the end of the day, that's somebody's son, that's somebody's brother, that's somebody's daughter, whatever. I said, I love you. And after that, people came up to me and thanked me, and they said, that's what we wanted to hear. Because this is the problem in law enforcement. When something like this happens now, and people know police are going to be scrutinized at a national level, what happens is they get their script together. It's like they had a meeting all in one night and said, okay, here's what we got to say, and here's what we got to do. Everybody ready? Let's go say it now. And you saw police chiefs from small organizations to major organizations all over the country, and they said the exact same thing. If you could quote what one of them said, let me know. And you can't, because it's not real. It's not from the heart. It's these traditional statements. We have to speak from our hearts. We have to tell them, not just that we don't condone this. What are we going to do about it? What would you have done about it? And that's what we do here in the Seaside community. The mayor talked about some of the things that we formed, the Community Safety Advisory Committee. Seaside was the first organization in California that I'm positive of who banned the chokehold before it became law, and then everybody had to ban it a year plus later. We did that on our own in Seaside. And we had full support from the mayor and the city council at that time, 100% support to do this. And what's even more beautiful is we had that support from our police officers. The union within the police department was 100% supportive of this. But here's the problem. policy can be changed. You can change it all day long. But as Ben Crump said at the funeral of Tyree Nichols, and let me tell you, when he spoke and he said this thing, I could not help myself but to say, finally somebody's saying it. And he kept repeating it. And then he asked the audience to repeat it. And he said, you have to change the culture. Do you remember what I'm talking about? You have to change the culture. I can put a policy right now that says everybody has to do X. And if the culture says, yeah, that's the policy, but nobody does it, so nobody has to do it. So you can ban the chokehold, but if the culture is they still do the chokehold, they're going to do the chokehold. So you have to change the culture. And the culture starts from the top. That's why you will see me, you'll see our commanders, we go out in the field. If you call for us, we're calling you back. You're going to meet with us, we're going to talk to you. We have to change the culture from the top, because if the officers see that the culture isn't there, they're not going to follow it. So we're doing that. We changed our department motto from honor, pride, and commitment. And that existed since 2006. And when I became acting chief, so that's another one of those things that we do as police. Honor, pride, commit, service, protect, and serve. What does that even mean? What does that mean? Ours is one simple word. It's trust. It's trust. Transparency, respect, unity, service, and training. And when I say training, we have to train our police to be the best to do their job correctly. But you can't train a bad heart. You can't train an evil heart. You can't train a hateful heart. We have to train. We also have to train our leaders that when you find one of these bad cops, you got to fire them. Yes. And maybe we need to be trained on that, because some cops, they shake in their boots. Some police chiefs shake in their boots because they don't want to push back from unions and so forth. If we see bad culture, it's our duty to get rid of it. That's it. I am so honored of the program we just launched last Friday. And this is something that I've been blessed. The city of Seaside has sent me to trainings all over the country, and I've been able to train with law enforcement leaders really from all over the world. I went to the FBI Academy and was training with leaders from Afghanistan, and you name the country, I trained with them. But you get to learn a lot too. You get to learn a lot how others do business. And we are blessed. We are blessed here in Seaside, let me tell you. We do a really, really good job. But I came across this program, Lights On, and essentially it's a program that was developed in honor of Philando Castile. Philando Castile was pulled over in 2016, July 6th, for having an alleged taillight out. He had a license to carry a firearm. Everything he had, license, registration, insurance, everything he had was completely legit. Little girl in the back seat of his car, his girlfriend's daughter and his girlfriend, and he gave the officer his ID, and he was reaching for his paperwork. And he tells the officer, just like his mother, Valerie Castile, told him, whenever you have your weapon on you, you tell the police, be honest with them. I don't want you to be a statistic. And you hear him in video say, officer, I just need to let you know I do have a firearm on me, in that calm, monotone voice. I've been here 20 years. I've had 3 guns pulled on me from vehicles. Never once did anybody let me know, hey, just want to let you know real quick, I got a gun under the seat. I'm about to reach for it. It's never happened. If somebody's going to harm you, in most cases, they're not going to give you the heads up. He didn't. As he's reaching for his paperwork, the officer tells him not to reach for it. And he says again, calmly, sir, I'm not reaching for it. The officer reaches in and shoots and kills him, shoots him 5 times, and almost shoots a little girl in the back of the car. Within 17 seconds, all this unfolds. He had a partner with him. He's outside of the car. There's daylight. It's not like it's dark and he can't see. It's daytime. All he had to do was retreat to his car, tell his partner, hey, I think he's got a gun, let me slow this down, or just step to the A-frame of the car and see what he's going to do. He had so many options. His option was to shoot and kill this young man who we now know was a beautiful human being, even if he wasn't. Beautiful human being. Again, Seaside, in front, on the map. I have developed a personal friendship with Valerie Castile. Valerie Castile was here in Seaside. Many of you were here last Friday. She was here, and let me tell you, when she left, you can go to her social media and read all about it, because she has it posted. But the love that Seaside gave her when she was here is remarkable. We ought to be proud of ourselves. That's how we lead. Right in the program, I believe it's on the last page, or maybe it's the first page, there's that image that somebody painted. And I want to read it because that's beautiful. And it says, all mothers were summoned when he called out for his mama. And they were, and they are. Miss Valerie is one of them. And let me tell you, she loves Seaside and she loves the things we're doing. And she said she wishes she could take the Seaside model and bring it to Minneapolis and change it at a much bigger level. We're doing it. We have to establish trust. And I'm not against reimagining policing, as I said, but I'm for changing policing. We're doing it. We're actively doing it here in Seaside. A couple of the things that I think are important to do. Police officers, police chiefs, they get up and you hear the word community-oriented policing. And then you ask a chief, explain to me community-oriented policing. You're gonna get the script that's gonna come out of the pocket, and they're gonna tell you, well, it's a relationship between the community so we can have good conversations and out the window. I don't wanna hear that. I wanna say, show me your evaluation forms. You're community-oriented, right? Let me see your evaluation form. Most police agencies, when you look at their evaluation form, there's no criteria to evaluate their community outreach or their community orientation. Where is it? But how many arrests you may have had may be one of the points, or how nice you are, how professional you are, or you arrive at work on time, and are your boots polished? Because I'm watching the news, I've never heard protests about the police having dirty boots. Never once. I've heard it for just something else. Not having a good relationship, not being open, and you don't see that in evaluations. Seaside has it in our evaluation. That's one of the things we changed. You can't change culture if it's not really established in the framework of your culture. How about the hiring process? How about the hiring process? We have our Community Safety Advisory Commission. They're gonna start doing this. We're just waiting on getting our HR director in place. Why isn't the community part of the hiring process of police? Can you imagine? Let's reimagine that. Can you imagine? Just imagine the connection you could have with somebody. You sit on a panel all day, you see young people coming in to be police officers, you get to hear their story, get to know them, and you have a say of, this person won't fit in this community, this person will. You get to partner with other officers and listen to what they say to understand them more, and then you can share with them so they can understand the community more. We are going to get our community engaged, not just at the chief's level, when somebody's going for a chief or a high ranking, and now we ask, no, this needs to be at the very line level and have input. And I'm almost done here. Lastly, and this is something you and I had chatted about, was this didn't start with George Floyd. George Floyd's name is huge because it rocked all of us. It was disgusting. And we can presume how that happened. Maybe it was because we were all locked on COVID and we all saw it and we weren't busy in our day-to-day lives and something came on the news and we missed it. Maybe. I don't know. But we have to understand the history. I think Miss Yvonne said that. We have got to understand that this happened way before George Floyd. Philando Castile was 2016. George Floyd was 2020. Rodney King was 92, right? The other thing too, and I'll close with this, is when we have these bad cops, we have to support the families and they need to be prosecuted. They need to be prosecuted. Philando Castile, Geronimo Yanez, I believe is the name of the ex-officer, he was charged with manslaughter and then acquitted. Today, and this is why George Floyd to me is important, because of George Floyd today, that officer goes to prison, 100%. Take the same circumstance after George Floyd, he's going to prison. Take Rodney King today, put that on video post George Floyd, 5 cops go to prison. 5 walked back then, beating a man with batons for multiple minutes, with a supervisor present, no intervention. So, thank you for honoring or letting me be here to speak. It is an honor to be here, to have the police in a situation that involves terrible policing, to be up here to tell you, we are really trying. And I want your input. I want the officers to get your input. And lastly, we love you. We really love you guys. Thank you so much.
Yes, please give this man a standing O, because this is what we need. It's on tape. We have witnesses. We are here for you. This needs to be a pilot program started all over this nation. You agree with me? Do you agree with that? Yeah. I mean, do you really feel me? Yeah. Because we have to roll up our sleeves, leave our egos at the door, and just come in and save our children.
That's right.
Children are watching. They're wondering, how should they respond? Should they run to a police officer for help or assistance, or do they run away? We want them to run to them, but we want them to be the police officers that this chief just shared. My goodness, I want to see so much more, but we're on a time schedule. I want to stay on time, pass on target. So the next person that I'm going to have come up here and speak briefly would be Jake. Please give this man a hand. He's from the Village Project. You know, Jake L. Osborne, he brings a fresh and new approach to setting strategy and direction and modeling the agency's culture at the Village Project. The values, the behavior to increase systems, to change. He's an example of all of that. So please give him another hand. He's doing some awesome work with the Village Project. Please go and check out the Village Project if you ever have an opportunity. Jake Osborne.
First and foremost, thank you, Ms. Simon, for allowing me to be here to speak. Just continuing just for a moment based on what Chief Borges said, I had a conversation with my mother the other day. The conversation was, she always says, I love you, be safe. Whether she sees me in person, whether I talk to her on the phone, she's always saying, I love you, be safe. So the other day I asked her, why do you always say, be safe? I'm not out here doing anything crazy or anything like that. And she told me, and she almost shed a tear because she told me that the reason why she says be safe is because you as a young Black African American, I cannot 100% guarantee that you'll make it home alive. I said, why is that? She said, because the chances of you encountering police officers is very high. It's alarmingly high. The chances of you not making it out that situation, especially if you're traveling across states and state, it's very high. So that just dawned on me for a moment that I can only imagine that to be in a parental position to where you can't guarantee that your son or daughter is going to make it home due to what's going on in today's society. So once again, I'm Jake Osborne. I'm the new program manager for our Elevate Youth program with the Village Project, where we encourage and educate and empower our youth to learn about systems change, because they're in the transitional years where it's important, where they need to know what's going on around them so that they can make educated and informed decisions with the culturally congruent perspective. As I was gathering my thoughts last night, I wrote down a few things that I'd like to share with y'all. Today, I stand before you to address a pressing issue that demands our attention and collective action, the dire need for positive change in our communities. As a society, we are measured not by our achievements alone, but how we uplift those who are most vulnerable among us. It is time for us to rally together to harness the power of compassion and progress, and to create a future where every member of our society has an equal chance to thrive. In the shadows of our bustling cities and beneath the noise of progress lie pockets of despair and neglect. Families struggle to make ends meet. Dreams are crushed by systemic barriers, and the cycle of poverty seems unyielding. But I stand here today to tell you that it doesn't have to be this way. We have the power to break these chains. We have the power to rewrite the narratives and to build a society where opportunity flows abundantly in every neighborhood. The first step towards positive change in the community is acknowledging the systemic factors that perpetuate inequality. It is not enough to simply cast blame or point fingers. We must confront these challenges head on with empathy and determination to create lasting solutions. We must recognize that poverty is not a choice, but a result of a flawed system that deprives individuals of their fair share of resources, education, and opportunities. To bring about the positive change we seek, we must invest in education like never before. Education is the great equalizer, the key that unlocks doors of opportunity and empowers individuals to realize their full potential. Let us commit ourselves to providing quality education regardless of zip code or socioeconomic status. Let us ensure that every child, regardless of their background, has access to the tools and resources they need to succeed. Furthermore, we must address the structural inequalities that plague our lower income communities. Decades of neglect and underinvestment have created a vicious cycle of limited resources and limited possibilities. It is time to break the cycle. We must allocate funds to revitalize our neighborhoods, to provide affordable housing, and to foster economic development that creates sustainable jobs. We must prioritize infrastructure projects that connect these communities to the opportunities that exist beyond our borders. But change cannot just be imposed from above. It must be built from within. We must empower the residents of our communities to become architects of their own destinies. By fostering community engagement, promoting grassroots initiatives, and amplifying the voices of those who have long been marginalized, we can ensure that our solutions are inclusive and responsive to the unique needs of our community. In the quest for positive change, we must also foster a culture of compassion and empathy. Let us reject the stigmatization of poverty and replace it with the understanding and support. Let us create a society where those in need are met with a helping hand, not a judgmental gaze. Together, we can build bridges of solidarity that span across our differences and remind us of our shared humanity. The need for positive change in our community is not a burden, it's an opportunity. It is an opportunity to redefine our values, to create a fairer, more just society, and to unlock the immense potential that lies within every individual, regardless of their circumstances. So now we have to march forward, hand in hand, guided by the principles of equality, justice, and compassion, and let us leave no one behind. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. And one more thing before I finish is the youth, that they listen and they look and they learn and they see everything. Yes, some of the conversations that we have that they see, let's say in their classrooms or in their community, they're asking me, where do we go? How do we change this? Are we old enough to change this? Does our voice matter? I'm like, of course it matters. Yes, it matters. It will always matter. They want to rally together and present themselves to you all to learn from you, and they want mentors so you can guide them on what they need to do step by step, because they're only going to learn from you all who have already been through it. So once again, thank you so much for allowing me to speak today. And all right. Yes, that's it.
Nice. My goodness. That's what we're talking about, is to make this happen, and we need leaders like this. Okay. Next, we'll have Miss Dr. Renee Penalver. Renee Penalver is an assistant professor of quantitative methodology in psychology at California State University at Monterey. Boy, CSUMB is in the house. Let's give CSUMB a Harvard. She also has her AA from Bakersfield, California, her BA in psychology at California State Bakersfield, her PhD in social cognitive neuroscience with an emphasis in quantitative methodology from University of Texas, El Paso in 2017. Renee is passionate about mentorship, education, social mobility, social justice. She serves as an officer for various boards, including she's a new president-elect. Excuse me, you're right, so I dropped elect. You are the new president of the Junior League of Monterey County. Please give her a hand. First Latina ever. And I am proud to say that I'm a junior leaguer. She got me to be involved in that. I said, if you're going to be president, I want to work with you on that. At the end of the day, she does so much in the area of child abuse. She's on that board, I believe, and so many other things. She'll also be introducing the next people after you speak, okay? Please give a hand to Dr. Penalver.
Thank you all so much. I'm so honored to be here today. And I want to start off before I begin by showing you this picture. So this is my baby girl, my niece, along with her best friend, Millie. And I'm going to talk about being an anti-racist today. And I think we have a lot to learn from children about this process. And they just get it, and it's something that we don't. And this was them when they had to leave each other. I'm Renee Penalver, as Ms. Simon mentioned. I am Mexican-American from Bakersfield, California. Like all of you, I was horrified on May 25th when George Floyd passed. And I'm here because I want to do something about it. Today I want to address a critical issue that affects our society and has far-reaching consequences: anti-Blackness in the Latinx culture. Anti-Blackness is a form of racism that targets Black individuals and communities, perpetuating harmful stereotypes and systemic discrimination. Although I am a woman of color, anti-Blackness is prevalent in our community. It is no secret that the Latinx community is incredibly diverse. If you look up on the screen, every one of these people are from the Latinx community. People hailing from various countries, different cultures and backgrounds. However, there is a dark undercurrent that runs through many of our communities, a pervasive anti-Blackness that has been ingrained in our culture for many centuries. It is a sad reality that many of us as Latinx individuals have internalized anti-Black attitudes and behaviors. And as a result, anti-Blackness in our community often goes unnoticed or undiscussed and is ignored. We often fail to acknowledge the deep-rooted racism within our communities and instead choosing to point fingers at others. This lack of self-reflection is detrimental to the growth and progress of our community. Let me be clear. Anti-Blackness is not just a problem for Black people. It is a problem for all of us. It is a problem for every person who believes in equality, justice, and human rights. When we perpetuate anti-Blackness, we perpetuate a system of oppression that harms us all. There are many ways that anti-Blackness manifests itself in the Latinx community. For example, we see it in the way that Black individuals are often portrayed in media and pop culture as caricatures or stereotypes. We see how Black people are often discriminated against in housing, employment, and education. And we see it the way that some Latinx individuals distance themselves from Blackness, viewing it as inferior or undesirable. It is essential to recognize how we may contribute to the marginalization of Black individuals, either through our actions or by failing to address these issues. This requires courage and bravery, and I challenge all my Latinx brothers and sisters here today to be brave with me. Education is also a critical tool in combating anti-Blackness. Being here today is essential. This includes reading books, watching films, engaging with other forms of media that center on Black backgrounds and narratives. It also means learning about the history of racism and oppression against Black individuals in our country and worldwide. One of my pictures got cut off. But together, we can address systemic racism and know that Black liberation cannot be achieved without dismantling the systems of oppression that contribute to racism. We can support Black-led organizations as these organizations are the front lines of advocating for racial justice and addressing the needs of the Black community. We should center Black voices, which is essential to promote Black liberation and joy. We can advocate for policies that promote racial justice and address systemic racism. These include policies that promote affordable housing, healthcare, education, and address police brutality and mass incarceration. We must recognize and address the intersectionality of the issue, recognizing how multiple forms of oppression intersect and compound one another. This involves supporting Black LGBTQ+ individuals, Black disabled individuals, and Black women. We must actively engage in anti-racism work, recognizing that it is an ongoing effort. This involves educating ourselves on issues of race and racism, confronting our own biases, and actively working to dismantle systems of oppression. Finally, we must acknowledge that anti-Blackness is not unique to the Latinx community. It is a worldwide problem that has resulted in centuries of violence, discrimination, and oppression against Black individuals. However, we must also recognize that the Latinx community has significantly contributed to this issue. Therefore, we must take responsibility for our actions and work to dismantle the structures that uphold anti-Blackness actively. It means calling out anti-Blackness when we see it, even if it means challenging our loved ones. In conclusion, I am here today to remind all of my Latinx friends that despite being people of color, we have work to do. First, as Latinx individuals, we should work to promote Black joy and liberation in America. We cannot simply address the issue once and then move on. Instead, we must commit to constant learning, reflection, and action. And by ending, I want us to think together about joy, the same joy that is illustrated in this picture, and the same joy that I hope that we can create together. Thank you. So I'm taking over as MC. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Jean Holloway. Jean Holloway has his PhD in industrial organizational psychology. He earned a master's degree in psychology and education and bachelor's degree in psychology from Ottawa University. Jean has over 15 years of extensive experiences resolving systemic DEI barriers, handling cultural diversity, tackling organizational diversity, equity, and inclusion, and helping organizations with leadership development and management. Please join me in welcoming Jean.
Ms. Michael. Thank you for allowing me to be here. My colleague and friend, thank you for always inviting me to come and ride with you, Jacqueline. It's a pleasure and opportunity to speak. I will be brief, won't be up here long. A lot of the work I represent has to do with data analysis and research, and it's not boring, actually. I thank God I was able to go back to school and learn how to do some of these things, but when that incident happened with George Floyd, yes, it broke my heart, and it allowed me to think about the color of my skin and things that I have to worry about all the time, things that my kids have to worry about. But I thought, what could I do to dedicate my life to make a difference? And that vision came to me very clear. And from that, I was already doing consulting and working, trying to help organizations, but I really made it clear that from policing to social workers to every area that touches the lives of people, I wanted to be committed to that in bringing research and bringing work in there. And the thing I wanted to do about it is, I want to give you some facts and information that's out there regarding the incident that happened. George Floyd was 46 years old. Now, as I'm approaching this part of my life as well, imagine my life being taken at that time. The person who took his life was 44 years old. When the lawsuit was finished, I think it was over $27 million to his family. But his death, he was not given. We have to put more resources into people when they live, not when they're gone. Not just their families, right? And And it takes money to do things, to be honest with you. I realize this diversity, equity, inclusion work is more talking and working with municipalities and leaders to really talk about where they're at and how they can work on their issues and problems. And then really getting them to make a decision where they can trust and really partner with consultants and people who can make a difference. So my goal was to show you about Diversity Atlas. On your table, there is it has a beautiful picture of the George Floyd Memorial, and there is a QR code. If you could scan that. And what I am working on is building trust with you. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. If you can pull out that card and scan that with your phone. That will take you to an anonymous survey. I'd love for you to complete that. It's anonymous, and it will allow us to get information on who attended here today. Because it's not just about what happened in the past, it's what's happening right now. All the colors in the room, all the parents represented by your mother and father, all the things that have happened to you are represented in who you are today. So my goal is to bring trust back into all the work we do, so that when you do something, you know the value of it. I'm going to send the results to Jacqueline and her organization. She'll email it to everyone who gives her email. You'll see the results of what does the diversity look like in the room, and it takes us understanding. Sometimes it's a lack of understanding of who you're working with. I'll give you a good example. George Floyd went to jail for 4 years. If you look up his history, he went to prison 4 years. He pled guilty to aggravated robbery and went to jail, got out of it. And when he moved to Minnesota, he actually was a truck driver and then was a bouncer, and then COVID hit. And when I think about COVID, I think for some people it just devastated them financially, devastated the fact that they can't provide, they can't do certain things, and it doesn't make it right to do the wrong thing. It never will. My mama taught me that. My parents were from the South as well. Mom from Alabama, dad from North Carolina. They migrate to California and have beautiful me. And here I am with these Southern roots, but love LA and love California where I'm from and love Monterey. I'm California all the way. But it's interesting how his roots and where he came from and the things that led him to that. And my goal in doing the work that I do is everybody have some type of roots. And those roots are what connect us to one another. Our roots don't only just connect us to people that we come from, but they connect us to being human. And when we lose track of that, it's easy for us to allow things like hate and difference to get in the way. So that's why I've made a commitment as being a researcher and being an analyst to make sure that I work with organizations that sometimes don't look like me. I've actually challenged, and I ask you to challenge some of those stereotypes that you have. I am not, and I'm going to repeat this, I'm not an entertainer. I love to joke and have fun, and I love watching LeBron James play. These people get paid lots of money to entertain. I'm not an entertainer. And I'll say that to say this, that we are, as leaders, are more responsible than just an entertainer, or just to make people smile, or make them laugh. We must think about when we look at someone who looks light-skinned or dark-skinned, we must think about who they really are. They're not just the skin color. The culture is so multifaceted. So lastly, I didn't want to speak up here long, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to look at what Diversity Atlas does, and it actually gives us some information about what does your diversity look like. And then from that, we're able to get information that's very helpful in saying, now what about if all your police officers, what about all of your social workers, what if they all had this information in reports that would really help them to understand how different but yet how same we are, and what changes that we need to make. It should go along with our information that we reveal. The last thing I'm going to say is self-ID. In the research that I'm doing now is you want to give people in your organization, people you work with, an opportunity to tell you who they are. It's not the government telling people who they are. So that means all different types of sexuality, all different types of tradition and religion or non-religion. We have to be acceptable to all of those different things and help people to be successful. And empowering the black community. I'm black and I'm always going to be black. My life has always mattered. My mama raised me to never think of myself as less or different. And it wasn't until I got around people who had a lot of power, who didn't look like me, who I just thought they were strange because they could never undo what Mama set me on the path to be, was to understand the warrior I am. The last name Holloway comes from a slave owner's name that's in North Carolina. And actually, so that's probably not the last name that I really do have. But that heritage that my great-grandma, who was born 8 years after slavery, so she got to see a lot of things, and she would say things like, I hate them white people, you can't trust them. Now, fast forward to my dad and having 13 kids, and I'd be the last one. I'm the love child. He told me, you are king. Always remember that. He used to drink and act a fool. I never did want to believe him because why are you drinking and calling me a king and we broke that? It makes sense. But what I realized he was trying to do back then was trying to share with me what was shared to him. Is that there's a light inside of me. There is something powerful inside of me, and it's up to me to work with that to become what I'm supposed to be in this world. And when I realized that, there was no such thing as hate that could change that love that was in my heart to let that light reflect. So years later, now I'm getting up in age, I realize, man, he was right. We all have that power and uniqueness in us, and it's up to us to make sure we reflect it to others and use our gift. My gift happened to be going and work with organizations and empowering them to understand data, research, and then do something about it. Last thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to sit down. It really took me a while to realize that most of the work that we are doing is not just for now. So meaning if I don't get instant results, if I don't get a contract, and I don't get you to agree with me to do this and do that, am I still going to do it? And when I made a commitment to say I'm still going to do it, the resources and the people that need to come and support the work that I'm supposed to do, the work you're supposed to do, they will come. So if you're not working hard enough to where you're going to leave a legacy for those behind you, you're not working hard enough. Let's work together.
Thank you, Dr. Holloway. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Mason and Dr. Karen E. Mr. Mason was born in Kentucky during the height of Jim Crow segregation and moved to Seaside in 1956 when he was 13. Considered one of this area's greatest basketball players, Mel accepted a scholarship to Oregon State University over 100 other universities. He would take a stand against the racism to which Black students and Black student athletes were subjected and lost his scholarship, and was barred from playing basketball at any other university. He soon became a social justice activist, revolutionary, and civil rights leader for over 55 years. His activism began with the membership in the Black Panther Party in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He has a long history of standing up against police brutality and misconduct. Dr. Karen E. earned her undergraduate degree in neuroscience from the University of California, Riverside. She then received her doctorate in clinical psychology from the Wright Institute. She specializes in trauma, severe mental illness, and psychological assessment. She chose this specialty to advocate for and reduce the stigma of mental illness, especially in underserved communities. She believes living with mental illness is never easy, but stepping into discomfort to do the work is powerful and healing. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Mason and Dr. Karen E.
Thank you, Renee. It's all right with you all. We're actually going to do the presentation down here so I can see my presentation. It is a privilege and an honor to be here today and to be in your presence and to share this space with you all. I just want to invite and express gratitude for you all being here, and to invite you all to express gratitude for yourself for being here and just showing up. It is not easy to be here today and have different conversations. I'm sure there are many other things that y'all can be doing with your time right now, but you chose to be here. So I just want to express my gratitude for y'all being here today. So what I'm going to talk about today, and I'll be quick, just for the sake of time, to respect you all's time, I'm going to just touch on a little bit about the clinical implications of trauma and the collective and historical trauma that we all experience. And so I'm going to start today by talking about this idea of bias. So we all have bias, and there's a couple of different ways to look at bias. There's some of the biases that are conscious, and there are biases that are unconscious. So you might hear the term implicit or explicit biases. And so explicit biases are sort of like those, for example, overt racism. Right? So for example, I like white people more than Latino people. So that would be an example of explicit bias. And then we have implicit bias, which is you might sit further away from someone who doesn't look like you. Or if you see a group of black men walking down the street, you might clutch your purse a little bit tighter. So with explicit biases, we're aware. Right? If I don't like somebody, I'm aware I don't like this person. Right? We're implicit, we may not always be aware or conscious of the fact that we're responding in a biased manner. So why is this important? Because the biases that we have lead to these sort of internalized perceptions that we have. And one of the major biases that we have is around race. You know, one of the things I always find frustrating is when people say, I don't see color. But that doesn't make any sense to me. So you can't avoid bias by avoiding race, it just doesn't work. So this is something that we have to talk about, even though it's difficult. However, just recognizing your biases isn't enough because it does have implications in other areas. So we see biases show up in economic status, we see biases in neighborhood being segregated, we see biases in the educational system. One of the flagrant ways biases show up in the education system is the school to prison pipeline. We see biases show up in work, certainly in criminal justice, and other areas. So some examples of institutional explicit biases, especially when it comes to policies and policing, looks like policies that specifically discriminate against a group of people. So for example, a police department refusing to hire a person of color. So that would be an example of explicit institutional bias. Implicit institutional bias may be policies that maybe on paper they're not necessarily stating that it's targeting a community, but it has that impact. Right? So for example, we think of in the late 80s and the early 90s, the war on crime legislations that were passed. So that would be an example of implicit institutional biases. Certainly we see that show up in the prison population, the boom of black and brown, really having way over representation in that setting. And again, examples of individual explicit biases, again, when you're sort of being prejudiced or racist against a group of people, and then an implicit biases against some of these unconscious attitudes and beliefs that we have. So why is this important when we think about trauma? So when we have this idea of collective trauma, so we're all here because we experienced a collective trauma with the killing of George Floyd, certainly a collective trauma in experiencing COVID. So collective trauma essentially is an event or series that shatters the experience of safety. And I really want to highlight this word of safety because that is very, very important when we're talking about trauma. Trauma really disrupts our sense of safety. So as a Black community, we experience collective trauma all of the time. That is a little different than historical trauma. So historical trauma are some of these generational traumas that we experience. So some examples of historical trauma is slavery, genocide, poverty, community violence, war. These are all examples of historical traumas. And obviously the impact of historical traumas, as I mentioned earlier, is multi-generational. So when we experience historical traumas, it leads us to be more vulnerable to PTSD and other stress disorders. We might see higher rates of violence, including domestic violence and child abuse, certainly poverty, lack of education, higher crime and incarceration rates. So there are significant impacts that historical traumas has on the individual and as a community. So again, some examples of collective trauma that we experience as it relates to police brutality. So in the context of trauma, we're again talking about stress. So what does stress affect? So we all experience stress. Right? So we can't avoid stress. It's about how do we respond when stress shows up. So stress, hopefully this is not any new information to anybody as to what the stress impact. So stress obviously impacts the body, impacts our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors. Right? As a clinician, I don't think it's any accident that, and especially in the Black community, there's higher rates of certain illnesses and diseases. I would argue that that's a response or a formulation related to stress. So you might experience physiological symptoms like headaches, muscle tension, just feeling on edge, like you can't relax, again, not having that sense of safety. And so I really like this grid because a lot of times, especially as a Black community, we get used to living in stress, and stress and trauma becomes normalized. And so we're not necessarily thriving, or we might mistake or misperceive struggling or in crisis as thriving. So being able to recognize where you fall into this category and how do you sort of prioritize, sort of your self-care. So I'm here to talk about today about self-care, and I'm talking about self-care from a very individual basis. And why is self-care important? Why should you care about taking care of yourself? I really love this quote by Mother Teresa. It says, to keep the lamp burning, we have to keep putting oil in it. So as a Black person living in a Black body, there's a lot of trauma that comes with that. Your presence, we always have to be aware of our physical body. And a lot of times as a way to sort of combat that trauma, we want to sort of advocate and show up. But sometimes that's hard work. Some days we just don't feel like we have the energy to do it, but some days we also don't give ourselves grace to not have the energy to sometimes not show up. So this idea of self-care is really, really important, and one that I feel like isn't talked about a lot, especially in Black and brown communities. So different dimensions of self-care. I won't go through all of them, but these are the different dimensions of self-care. Again, the psychological self-care, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual self-care. So the psychological and the emotional is, for example, giving attention to things that are in your control. A lot of times we struggle to do that, right? A lot of anxiety shows up for us. Setting clear boundaries with your time and your energy, whatever that means to you. And then being self-aware of what creates stress. And I really want to highlight this idea of breathing. The breath really is, that's the essence, that's the core of life. So being able to just take a moment, just to take a deep breath at your own pace and exhale. There's power in that. I was here all the time. I don't have time to do self-care. It takes too much time. And that's fair. That's a fair thing to say. But I would counter and say self-care doesn't have to take up a lot of time. If you can dedicate 1 minute every day or 1 minute every hour to do something that's for you, that's self-care. When you go from point A to point B and you take that few seconds, few minutes to take a deep breath, that's self-care. So a couple just sort of tips that I wanted to offer and leave y'all with is this idea of paying attention to your body. I'm a big proponent of just kind of connecting with your body because a lot of the ways that we experience stress is in the body. So when was the last time you took a moment just to kind of scan your body and pay attention to what's going on? If you notice you tend to have muscle tension or shoulder tension, that's your body communicating something to you. So taking a moment just to kind of scan your body and see what you find. Other self-care tips, of course, eating well, exercise, sleep is very important, and this idea of having fun. I know when you go to your doctors, they don't usually talk about fun and humor, but that's very, very important. And talking, I'm going to put a plug as a mental health professional. Talking is really important, but talking to the right person. And it doesn't have to be a mental health professional. In certain communities, going to a mental health professional is not something that we're sort of encouraged to do. It might be your pastor, it might be your teacher, it might be your sibling, right? So I would say find your tribe. Who is that person? Who is that safe space for you? Where is that safe space for you? And how much are you prioritizing connecting with that safe person for that safe space? just taking a moment, I thought I had more time, but again, something to sort of think about is this idea of joy. And I know, Renee, you mentioned that. I love that idea of joy. Is when was the last time you gave yourself permission to experience a moment of joy? What gets in the way of doing that more often? And then being aware of what are your personal triggers and how do you sort of recharge your battery? Again, talking, who you talk to is really important, again. And then lastly, and I know that we have some more resources in the packet, but I wanted to offer some free resources to kind of help, plant some seeds around what resources are available. They're free, which is always nice, and they're easily accessible on your phone. So please check these out or share these with other people. There is certainly help and resources available should you need it. And of course, some additional resources that I listed as well. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Ego, Dr. Karen. And we're going to be doing a lot of work together. So it's a real pleasure seeing you again. And we're going to get together again on a lot of stuff, right? Okay, good. Again, my name is Mel Mason. Among other things, I am a licensed therapist. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. Everything that Karen, Dr. Egu just mentioned, some of these were things that I was going to talk about, but I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to stay up here very long either. But we'll do that. But there are a couple of things that I'm going to diverge. I'm going to diverge just a little bit because some things came up that are really, really critical, and they could actually be considered mental health issues as well. But one is, and Dr. Renee, on this question of black and brown, and sometimes the anti-black sentiments, feelings that come from the brown community, the Latinx community, against black people. One of the things that we have done over the years, because I spent a lot of time in Mexico. I spent a lot of time in black towns in Mexico. I spent a lot of time with people who just found out that they were black in Mexico. And but one of the things that we started to do was to remind folks that, the lead general in the War of Independence against Spain, Vicente Guerrero, who was also the second president of Mexico, was of African ancestry. His second in command in the War for Independence against Spain was a man named Jose Morelos. Jose Morelos was of African ancestry. The last governor of Mexico, the last governor of California when it was still Mexico, was a man named Pio Pico. You go to Los Angeles, almost everything in the world is named after him. Pico Boulevard, Pico Museum, Pico Park, it just goes on and on. Pio Pico was of African ancestry. Pio Pico actually had a house here in Monterey because that was then the capital, right? So homeboy was living right over across the bay. Okay. So, and then when I was in the Black Panther Party, the first coalition that we formed was with the Brown Berets. And that was a real problem for the government. So just to kind of get that out into the communities, and I think that some people will be shocked to find out that they're black too. They got black blood, but we have to do that kind of education. Splitting us is by design. Okay, we will carry it out, but it serves someone else's interest to have black and brown people not together. And so we need to look at this politically and be able to explain this educationally and politically to our folks. Okay. Last thing, qualified immunity. I'm a real skeptic when it comes to police. I think former Chief Ben Cooper is here, and I think when Ben and I first met, I was not exactly a fan of police. So, but I'm liking what I'm hearing from Chief Borges, but I'm always a healthy skeptic, because as long as we still have stuff like qualified immunity, then I'm having some issues with police. I'm just being open and honest and trying to have a difficult discussion. Okay? Now, or a less difficult one maybe. Thank you again, Karen, for all of this information, because this is all really real and on point. When we founded the Village Project in 2008, there was no such term as racial trauma in this area. We started the term racial trauma. I didn't realize that we had started it. It was just something that was natural for me, because I knew I had it, for one thing. But racial trauma really refers to the emotional impact of stress that's related to racism, racial discrimination, and race-related stressors, like stereotyping. Empowerment, it becomes an issue for folks who are traumatized in this way. Because what it puts into us is incredible feelings of helplessness. So therapy is going to necessarily involve working with the client to get control back, to get back self-control. The strategies also necessarily involve self-care, and the work is not for us to tell the client what self-care is, because what self-care is to me may not be self-care to the person that I'm sitting across from. But having them begin to think out what self-care means to them. What have you done that's made you feel good? What have you done that's made you have joy? I can tell you what I think ought to give you joy, but it probably won't be right. So we have to be able to work with the folks, in that vein. But we can do some things like relaxation, visualization. Visualize yourself being stress-free. Visualize yourself being by a running brook. Visualize yourself being in the most peaceful environment. And maybe it's just you and almost nothing else. But whatever it is, be able to visualize that regardless of where you are. And then one of the things that I've found really most effective is to then begin to work with people around, what do you see as the injustices? And when they begin to talk about what they see as the injustices, then you can quietly suggest, well, is that something worth speaking out on? And we've had a number of instances where clients who at one point had been racially traumatized just showing up somewhere speaking out, because in that process of them thinking their way through this, they begin to find empowerment, and the empowerment then leads them to become advocates. That takes a lot of work. It's also about culture, and it's also about what it means to be a black person in this society. I've had colleagues tell me that they don't allow discussions about race in their therapy sessions. My response is, that's why the person that you were working with is coming over to the Village Project. Because the race is central to the issues that we face. And so, when I think about racial trauma, racialized trauma, racial trauma, whatever we want to call it, it's a part of a continuum. And I think Karen just mentioned that earlier. Trauma is intergenerational. I've done trainings before, and this will show you how racism, whether you want to call it implicit or explicit, works. I would ask people about different groups of folks that have been through pure D living hell, as we used to say. Whether it's Jewish sisters and brothers in the Holocaust, whether it's the Armenians and the genocide, or you pick any other group, and I would say, do you believe that intergenerational trauma exists for these folks? And all the white folks would certainly raise their hand, oh yeah, gosh, you know, that's intergenerational trauma. And then I would say, what about post-traumatic slave syndrome? No hands. I said, what I'm talking about is something that started somewhere and comes down through generations. No hands. Then my question is it because we're black that you don't think intergenerational trauma exists? And then folks would get all defensive and everything, and maybe even hand and go, oh yeah, well, I just thought about it. No, you didn't. But that, to me, there could be nothing more traumatic than enslavement. Just think about it. Nothing could be more traumatic than that. And so when we look at racial trauma today, what I contend that it is really a symptom of intergenerational trauma for black people that goes back to slavery. It's a symptom. Some people say, well, it's its own disorder. PTSD is its own disorder. When it comes to black people, I contend that it is a symptom because the intergenerational trauma basically has been exacerbated as a result of ongoing racial discrimination, the fall of Reconstruction, the implementation of the black codes, Jim Crow segregation. Wouldn't that do it? I'm thinking that it would. So we have to take a look at PTSD when it comes to black people in a much different way. In a much different way. I had the experience, and I'm going to shut off here pretty soon because I'm probably running you out of time, Jacqueline. But I was working many years ago with an older gentleman. He was a native Hawaiian. And he had classic symptoms of trauma. My first thinking was he must have had some run-in somewhere along the line here in the United States with somebody because he came over from Hawaii. Make a long story short, what turned out to be the case was that he was suffering from trauma that started with the overthrow of the monarchy in Hawaii. That then led, you know, and the overthrow was by the so-called industrial army with the Dole Company and all those clowns. Because then what happened was that laid the groundwork for the native Hawaiian people to lose their land. And while he was not there then, he may not have been born then, I don't think, but the fact that he knew that these things had happened has stayed with him. Also, what we found is that trauma is also in our tissues as well as in our emotions. So trauma gets carried on. So a friend of mine, someone who I've actually taken trainings from, by the name of Dr. Joy DeGroy, wrote a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And all of that's in there, and for me, I think I've borne witness to all of this by just the work that I've done with folks that fit right into her book. Ultimately, black people have the cultural history of living collectively. We do everything collectively. And that still is the case today. I mean, you can make cases for some people breaking away from that, but in general, you know, the nucleus of our existence is about living collectively. That old adage, I am because we are. And so we have come up with, and when I say we, I'm talking about an organization I belong to called the Association of Black Psychologists, and also a black organization called the Community Healing Network. Came up with something called Emotional Emancipation Circles. And we're going to start doing them again. Pandemic got us, we did it about 4 or 5 times. It's an incredible healing circle. And one of the primary things that it does is deals with the lie of white superiority and black inferiority. It's a 15-session group. It's intense, but all of us black folks are together when we're doing it, collectively. I am because we are. And so I just want to give one example from the book. And I talked with Dr. Joy once about this experience because she had talked about having it, where she and 7 other black women want us to come up with a healing circle like the emotional emancipation circles. Let me read this. So this is her and these 7 other sisters' trip to Africa. They were meeting with a group of women in a village in the far outback. They had a leader who was a gentleman that took them there, who introduced them. So she was the first to introduce herself. She said, I stood up and said, my name is Joy. I'm from Portland, and I'm traveling with 8 other African-American women. We are hoping to build and sustain a positive sharing relationship with our African sisters. I'm very happy to be here. I then sat down. The translator began translating what I had said, and the 9 of us noticed that despite the brevity of my comments, the translator seemed to be going on and on at length. Soon the people in the room started to chant, and then they started to clap. My sister gave me a puzzled look as if to say, is this going to happen every time we speak? I leaned over to the translator and whispered. I said, I know that I didn't say very much. So what exactly did you say to them? He said, I told them exactly what you said. But when I got to the point where I said that you were African-American women, I needed to explain what that meant. You see, many of the people in this audience are from small, isolated villages with limited exposure to outsiders, and they thought that all Americans were white. So I had to explain to them that the 8 of you were the descendants of the ones who had been stolen away. They were chanting back to you, welcome home. Once again, everyone began singing because I had burst into tears. I caught a glimpse of my sister glaring at me and shaking her head because she knew that once again we would all have to sing. As I wiped the tears from my face, I had noticed a woman standing in the back of the room watching me. Now she began walking over to me. She shared that she had studied for many years in the United States, then gently took me by my hand and said, did you think that we would ever forget you? I am from Lesotho. Lesotho is my home. If I leave Lesotho, Lesotho is still my home. If I leave Lesotho for 50 years, Lesotho is still my home. You are African. 300 years from home. We mourn Martin and we mourn Malcolm with you. We are so proud of you. We just wondered when you were coming home. The tears flowed and we sang yet again. That was the experience, that was that collective experience. And what Joy told me and the other folks who were sitting and talking with her is that when she left that village, it was like 20 tons of something had been lifted off of her. That was healing. But to hear somebody tell her, we've been waiting for you. We were wondering when you were coming home. You are 300 years removed from home. Did you think that we would ever forget you? And she said, she mentions that now in all of her trainings. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of end my talk with that, just to talk about the collective existence that we live and how collectively we get through things like trauma, whether it's racial trauma or trauma period. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for staying so long. We're wrapping up right now. Before we wrap up, we have randomly selected 10 of you to win the 10 cast books. They have been donated for the cast club, so thank you so much. Our first winner is Christina Medina Dirksen, Janet Wilson, Joshua Gross, Lyndon Tarver. Are all of you here so far?
I'm here.
Okay. Mike Bruno. Is Mike Bruno here? William Anzenberger. Is William here? Okay, William's not here, so Denise Maiden. Denise is here. Jessica Voss, is Jessica here? No, okay. Kathy Biala is no longer here. Mark Zakovich, is Mark here? Okay. Marilyn Vieira. Go ahead and keep your hand up. Julie Altman. And Jess Cortez. Keep your hands up for the books to go around. And congratulations to, this was randomly done, so use a random name generator. Thank you so much. Please take a round and look at the art before you leave. I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Simon to wrap us up. Thank you so much for being here today.
And please give a hand to Dr. Renee Penalver. She rocks everywhere she is and is involved with so many programs in the community. So this is going to be auctioned off, and any of the funds that anyone uses to purchase it, those funds will go to the Helen Rucker Center for Black Excellence, for gas stipends, for if someone just needs something, because that's what that center is about. I'm on that board, and there's a lot of need out there at CSUMB. CSUMB is doing, I would guess, the best they can to support students, but we need to do more because the enrollment rate has dropped from in the past, a much larger number, but now down to 163 students at CSUMB. Excuse me. I am talking about our people. Okay, sorry, I should never assume. You're right. Dr. Lopez Littleton, my buddy right here, my golf partner. So this is going to be auctioned off right now. So I'll start the first bid at $50. Anyone else want to go higher than that? 50? 50 bucks? You have to go 55 because I did 50. 55. 60. 65. Ms. Medina again. Councilwoman Medina, 65.
$100.
100. Oh my goodness, give her a hand for the 100 seat spot there. Well, thank you, thank you. Anyone over 100? Okay, I will. 200. Okay, Mr. Goings, Stephen Goings, did I see your hand up before mine? Before I said 200? Did you want to do that? Or? Oh, 201, yes, that's what we want. 201 going once. Anyone else? Dr. Lopez Littleton?
I'm going to go with 205.
Oh, 205 right here. That's why she's doing so much. 20. I heard, is that Chris Walton? Did you say 20 something? 205.50. Okay, so we're at 205.50 right now. 205.50. Going once, twice, sold. Stand up, so we get identified. All right then. And while Mr. Goings is standing up, he's also from CSUMB, director. Please give him a hand. CSUMB is in the house. Big time here today, and we thank you. He has forms, applications that you can use to sign up for the NAACP. I have some here. Did you have anything else you wanted to say in regards to that?
That's it. They come to our meeting tonight at 7 right here at Oldemeyer Center.
There we go. So let's give him a hand on that. Let's certainly support him. This is beautiful. 205. I'm going to be visiting you at your office just to visit with us. This is an original. Again, Tammy, and Ann, please stand up. These are the artist is Pamela in the middle. The rest are part of the group that I'm a part of this of the book club. And they just did so much. Look at all this. They created this, and some of them was created specifically for our event. They have some original pieces here for that. So I thank you so very much. They're doing such great work. Also, I want to acknowledge Miss Racine McWhorters. Racine, there she is. And you are going to have a canvas, I believe, here that's for any of you to participate in. The canvas is for you to write any word or feeling that you have in regards to inclusion, diversity, or working and dealing with law enforcement and how to empower yourself. She is a part of our Black Space group that meets every Monday. And she came up with this idea of this campus, taking it around to all the schools. And I've already talked to a couple of superintendents to have those students and kids just come and use this painting to write some piece of artwork and or feeling that they have in regards to it, because that can start the conversation centered around inclusion and diversity. So please give her a hand for that. Thank you so much.
I'm asking all of you here to come over and make a pledge to peace also. I've got paint, I've got markers, you can write something, and I've got paint sticks. So you can, everyone come over, do something. With a heart, whatever it is that represents you giving a pledge to work for peace and unity.
All right.
Can you repeat what you said?
Pardon?
Can you repeat what you said?
Yes. This is a canvas that anyone today, before you leave, you can come over and use the paint and the brushes to put on anything in regards to your feeling about today or inclusion and diversity. And she's going to be taking this around to all the schools, as many schools as possible, to start the conversation of inclusion and diversity and issues surrounding law enforcement and how to go about working together more closely with law enforcement and the police systems. We need there to be a relationship, a positive relationship, and so she created that. So before you leave today, please do this. We also have a canvas that Pamela Bosmer also brought that you can sign in the same manner, and we're keeping that and using it at every event that we go to. All right, on that note, I'd just love you to give hands to all those individuals that have given back. And, you know, and what's really important about that, excuse me, my older sister is beckoning me to listen to her for something, so give me a moment. Yes, Brenda. Give my sister a hand. I'm glad she came today. Great. Ms. Ruthie Watts would like to say something.
I would like to announce that the Coalition of Scholarship Organizations will hold its 21st Scholarship Breakfast on June the 10th at the Emcee Suite Hotel. We have 23 scholarship recipients that we're going to be giving scholarships to. I have some invitations if you did not get one, so please see me afterwards.
All right.
Wonderful, thank you. My goodness, and she has great bone and voice projection, because I heard you up here. Thank you. You know, so we're, you know, getting to the end of the event today. I'm hoping that you learned something. The whole idea was learning, teaching, and healing. For me, how this all started was seeing George Floyd being murdered on international TV. I have clients all over the world, and they were emailing me and wondering what was happening, what's going on in your community, in your country. And I had no answer at that point. I recall sitting down and just really crying. And through tears, I grabbed I'm an academician, an educator, always have a pen and a notebook near me to document thoughts and ideas. And so I just started writing down everything I thought and saw on TV that day that was wrong as far as criminal justice goes. I have a criminal justice background. My family has 4 generations having worked in the criminal justice system. So I know how very wrong so much of that was. So I can't still unsee those moments, and probably you as well. And if you have gotten over it, I don't know how. But I think what we need to do is learn how to deal with that level of trauma And what I decided to do was focus into something positive and good. And this is what I did, is to invite people, invite an awesome community of people to help me, and there's been so many. And Ms. Guerrero, if you're representing, I know, Jimmy Panetta's office, Congressman Panetta's office, so if you would come up, please, that would be wonderful. So decide what you can do. Just think about it. It could be as small as just talking to your family about inclusion and diversity and how to deal with and treat your fellow person, whoever that might be. We need to start doing more of that. It's just so very important too. The other thing that I can't unhear is my nephew saying, why do police hate us so much? Can't. Bryson, yes, Bryson, my 14-year-old nephew. So this is part of what I'm doing to hopefully help you all with manners and ways to encourage others to participate and be part of it. Before I bring Ms. Guerrero over, please take a look at this wall here where you have pictures of just a few, very few, of the many individuals that have been murdered, mostly by law enforcement, for broken tail lights and so many other areas. And it was created by one of the individuals that I am blessed and so fortunate to mentor at CSUMB. And that is Selena Aki. Would you stand, Selena, please? Give her a hand for. We were talking about the event today, and she said, Ms. Simon, I'd like to do something special today for that event because it so still bothers her. So that's what she did. So what we need to do is decide what you can do. I'm so proud that we have so many law enforcement and even my division chief from North County Fire Protection District, Division Chief Jeff Cortez. Stand up, Mr. Cortez. He's rocking it out there at North County Fire. So proud that they were able to evacuate the 2,000 individuals from our district that is in Pajaro, and we're working with hopefully the Community Foundation to do more because there needs to be so much more there. And every other law enforcement and individual that came today that took the time to support this effort. And before he walks out of the room, I want to make sure Mr. Kelvin Whitham, is he still here? He's on his way out? Oh, there he is. Look, I saw you walking towards the door. So let me make sure I acknowledge you because I've never met you, but I so appreciate you. We need you. All of us need each other, and that's partially what the little artwork has to do with it. So thank you for coming today, and let's definitely get on each other's calendar and work together. That's what it's about. Thank you. Give me a hand, please. So what I'd like to do now is introduce Sashi Guerrero. Please come on up. And she's representing Congressman Jimmy Panetta's office.
Hello everyone, I'm Sashi Guerrero and I'm here proudly representing your United States Representative Jimmy Panetta. The Congressman sends his regrets that he was unable to attend due to his responsibilities in Washington, D.C. But he commends the organizers, volunteers, and community members on their necessary work to build the awareness and action needed to enact criminal justice reform and build safer communities. In Congress, Representative Panetta continues to fight for the George Floyd Justice and Policing legislation to ensure accountability in communities across our country. He understands that while no piece of legislation will automatically correct past inequality, passage of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would be a major step forward. As someone who fought for justice for nearly 20 years in our criminal court system, Representative Panetta was honored to be an original co-sponsor of this critical legislation and continues to engage citizens in our community to call for change and reform at every level through forums, discussions, and symposiums like this one. Today, as we mark the 3rd anniversary of George Floyd's murder, President Biden reiterated his call for congressional action. Representative Panetta will continue working to ensure law enforcement lives up to its role to sustain and support all communities. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And now, I don't know if you know this, but we're going to be awarding for their excellence in the community and, don't get away, come on now. This individual is just so much involved in CSUMB and the community, and I actually think he might have had to leave already shortly. It was Brian K. Corpenny. Is he here still? Or did he? I know he was here a while ago. Yes, so this is in recognition of his work and his exceptional work in the community advocacy and inclusion, diversity, and all that he's doing. So we would have loved him to have been here to officially receive this, but we will make sure he gets it. Let's give him a hand, just in spirit. Next, I happen to know this rock star is here, and believe me, she's a mover and a shaker in the community. So love her work, and just so honored. Mary Claypool. All right, please give her a hand. You're doing so much.
I just want to say thank you and congratulations to you and everyone that put this fabulous event on today. It's unfortunate that we need these discussions, but we're blessed to have people like you who are dedicated and passionate and will put in the work to make sure we all are educated and we have the chance to have a discussion about these issues. So thank you very much, and thank you for the recognition.
Absolutely, and I'm just trying to keep up with you. Wonderful. Next, this person probably doesn't even realize that she's going to receive this. You know what? I'm looking. She might not even be here now. But the rock star I mentioned earlier, Dr. Vanessa Lopez Littleton. Please. I know you're an athlete, so you could probably really get up here quick. We are on a time. Talking about being on time, on task, and on target. Little picture. And let's please give a hand to Dr. Lopez Littleton and our photographer. He's so awesome. He's everywhere. You see him at Juneteenth. You see him at the work, just taking pictures.
Brian is still here.
Brian is here. Brian just got here.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Brian.
But un momento, por favor. Please, Mr. Daniels, give Robert Daniels a hand. He's Well, I heard that Brian is in the house, so please, Brian K. Corpenny, please come on down. There you are. All right. He's, of course, another person from CSUMB, done so much in the area of inclusion, diversity, and such. And sometimes people aren't awarded until they're not here any longer. We want to make sure that didn't happen with any of you. So, right here.
Right here.
Oops. All right. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, thank you. Oh, he's good. That's good. All right, next. Thank you. This person has been working, I'm her mentor, and I've known her for 6-7 years. She's always helped people everywhere. She's a social worker now. She helped to provide all kinds of support services to people in need during COVID. Their office and work, I think they allocated over $5 million to so many people in Monterey County that almost lost their homes or their apartments or whatever they had. And that is Miss Monica Tran Kim. And she's a millennial, so she can really get up real quick. There you go. Monica also is published. She's written a number of books and poems and even music. Monica, thank you for all you do. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for this amazing opportunity. Please get some gift bags to go home. There are Ziploc bags. Please take some food home. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. She says that too because she helped to put that all together back there. Give her another big hand for that. Thank you. And of course, I don't have to say any more, but Yvonne Thomas, Certificate of Special Congressional Recognition presented to Yvonne Thomas. And I know she's a golfer, so she could probably motivate up here pretty quickly too. And we appreciate that. You know, she's doing so much in the community. We are looking forward to the podcast. Thank you.
Just thank you all for coming out. This event has grown since last year. It was in a smaller venue last year, so I'm just so happy to see so many of my Seaside family out coming to support this most important cause. Thank you.
Awesomeness. Thank you. Next person, couldn't have put this event on without her. Dr. Renee Penalver, please, come on down. I see her in the pink suit, she's way in the back of the room. If we clap until she gets up here, that would be wonderful. We could ask for exercise, and she'll have exercise, and you'll be leaving sooner than we thought. Volunteer committee member of the George Floyd Reimagining Policing, Inclusion, and Diversity Symposium, has such a big heart. It's one reason why CSUMB, I believe, is just an awesome university that has people like this. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, one more hand for Dr. Penalver. So let's see how this one's going to be done. This is for Wes White, volunteer committee member. He's the person that's videoing. Come on, Wes. We're going to get you on camera here. You know, I don't know if you know, I've known him for maybe 15 years. He's always volunteered to do all these wonderful events, and I just so appreciate that about you. And on behalf of the Certificate of Special Congressional Recognition to present it to you on all the work you've been doing with us. All right, Wes, thank you. So it's always awesome to have someone work with you that has connections. This individual was able to get us all the Starbucks free coffee. And this is Diane Archuleta. Diane Archuleta, come on down. She's looking at me like, are you sure? Yes. What? You know, we're talking grassroots effort of making sure that we were able to afford the event. People volunteered, people donated, and this meeting definitely had a lot of sway on us getting, I believe it was worth over 100 people could utilize this. So Diane Archuleta, please, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you, everybody. This was definitely unexpected. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All righty then. Next. Oh. Now this is, so this individual just did a lot of work from say their name to mentoring to working on so much the past year. And just never says no, will always help. And it's Selena Aki for your volunteer committee member services as a certificate of special recognition from a congressional office of Jimmy Panetta. Please, can you give her a hand for that? Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming today. This was my first time ever coming to a symposium, so it's definitely been an emotional roller coaster, and I hope we can move on from here and do great things in this world. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. All right, the next is Dr. Karen Eku, and we know she's at Chomps right now. She had a client right after her speech today, so we'll keep that for her. I believe Pastor Irving had to leave about a half hour ago, so I will make sure that he gets his. So this individual just took the time to make contact with myself and spend time working with us in the community and created all this lovely artwork. And she's now talking to Derek Williams. It's Pamela Buster. Please come on down. Come this way. She's still trying to sell the items so we can donate to the Helen Rucker Center. I love that. Oh, good. So, here we go. This is Pamela.
Thank you so much. I am woke. You know, Santos said something yesterday. Santos from Florida said that, oh, these woke people, they have a virus in their minds. It's a woke virus. Well, I have the virus, and I know everybody else in here has the virus. We have the woke virus in our minds, and that's why I'm so fired up. That's why I'm here, and that's why I painted these things. I don't even paint. I just started painting because of this passion. After George Floyd died, I was absolutely passionate to do something, and that's why we have this group, and that's why I'm painting, and that's why I'm here. And I've got the virus.
I hope you heard that. She's got the virus. Does anybody else have the virus? If so, a little yelp, a little hey, hey. That's right. Thank you, Pamela. And I look forward to our next book club. And I noticed I've seen some people that I didn't see earlier. I see Joy Jacobs. Please give her a hand. She's with the organization called Black Professionals, working together, making it happen, connecting with community. I see Mr. Derek Williams. Please give him a hand. He's doing some wonderful work. I love attending all the forums. Working together, African American, Black, Caucasians, for the first time meeting each other in a movie environment, and he's helping to make that happen. I was at a function where the 80-year-old lady stood up and said, I've never had a conversation with an African American before. And so after that, she was teary-eyed about it. It was a healing moment. And then I reached out my hand and I said, well, welcome to that relationship. And that's what we need to do, is things on that level. So people, please go over and sign up with these on the canvas. Please give yourselves a hand for your patience and your involvement here today. Everyone, please give yourselves a hand. Before we leave, I also see there's some royalty in the house. Teddy, hey Teddy? Teddy? Can everybody just give this man a hand? He is at the grassroots level doing all kinds of things in Seaside and building and mending relationships with law enforcement and our community. So Ted, thank you for being here. No, I want to thank Sashi Guerrero. She represented Jimmy Panetta today. He's on the floor in Washington representing us. My last call to action is, if you look in the document, the brochure, it'll state what we are doing is to advocate for the passage, of the George Floyd Policing Act. We need to get that done. So call your representatives, call anyone you know, and make sure you're doing the same. We need to push that through, because if we do, we can stop qualified immunity, which is one of the biggest problems. On that note, I close. Thank you for coming.